Where's my father? Nowhere to be fucking found. You know why he was nowhere to be fucking found? Because I just got a relationship with him a few months ago. Because my mom told me my dad wasn't shit to keep me away from my dad. But my dad didn't know. My dad did not. I thought my dad was a bitch ass fuck nigga. Because that's what my mom called him.
Mm-hmm.
My mom didn't know. My mom told my mom, I'm 26, bro. I'm 26. My mom kept me away from my dad for 26 years. You know what kept me away from him? My mom told me that my dad said I was a mistake and kept me away from my fucking father. Every time, this nigga been looking for me since I was a kid.
Yeah.
He's been looking for me. Can you imagine all the kids out there who got a fucked up ass mom telling them their daddy ain't shit, but the daddy looking for them? I finally talked to my dad. He's a good dude. My mom told me my dad has not paid child support since I was a kid. I finally meet this nigga. He has envelopes full of fucking shit proof showing he been paying child support. He told me, he said, your mom is a lying, manipulative bitch. I have not talked to my mom in months. You know why? My mom called me. My mom's in California. My dad's in North Carolina. I moved out of LA. I can't live in North Carolina or LA because I hate those places because of the trauma I went through on both of those places. My mom calls me. What you doing, baby? What's going on? I'm at my dad's house. What the fuck you doing at that bitch ass nigga house? Didn't I say don't discuss family business? Like, my dad comes and he busts through the door. My dad is happy and married. He's a street nigga. I can't talk about what he do, but he's a street nigga. He's happy and married. My mom has been bitter and having sex with so many goddamn dudes of different races, and she just got married recently to a nigga she met on Tinder for 1 month. My mom didn't get married because she was in love with the nigga. She got married because she didn't want to be lonely.
Yeah.
My dad bust through the door and snatched the phone. I was trying to, no. He snatched the phone. He said, hello. My mom said, put my son back on the phone. And I'm like, and he's like, he starts off calm. He's like, hello? Put my son back on the phone. No, it's my son too. What do you want? Put my son back on the phone. And my dad loses it. You fucking dumbass bitch. You rapist bitch. You been molesting my child. How? Going in on my mom. And I'm listening to my mom. All that slapping, abuse, and beating me up, choking me when I'm on the floor, beating me with belts, wrapping hangers around other hangers, beating me till I pass out and wake back up, whelps on my back, scars and shit. My mom turned into a 2-year-old little girl when my dad started talking to her. She talked to me like a bitch my entire life when I don't listen to her. But when my dad got on the phone, I saw the weakness come out. I have never saw my mom submit to a man the way she submitted to my father. Why my father's wife is in the room. My father's wife is letting her do all this. And he's yelling on the phone, you mad because I left you. And I didn't want to be with you no more. And you kept my son away from me as a weapon. My mom used her kids as a weapon. She used me and my little sister as a weapon. Whenever my mom will get pissed off by my dad or my sister's dad, she would say so many times that you will never see your son again if you disrespect me. Or you would never see she used me and my sister as pawns. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Us as chess pieces. I have a belief, now that I'm older and realize that my mom was the devil the whole time. If you're a child of anybody, I don't care if you're 40, 50, 60, you're a child of somebody. If you have one parent or no parents, I feel like it is every human being's responsibility.
All right, the video actually didn't fully download, so the rest of it just froze. So I'll let you know what he was trying to say. If you're the child of a parent that told you or is telling you, because this is for young people also, that your dad wasn't shit, your dad didn't want you, your dad left you for whatever, is a very good possibility that it's a lie.
What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, daily masculinist news. And today, we just witnessed a very interesting account of one's upbringing and familial situation. His brother is Kalan Rashad Walker, very young cat whose work I first encountered when he played in the Superfly remake, and I thought he did an excellent job. But apparently, in some respects, he really just played himself, because that rage was a little too genuine on the screen for an actor that new. So it didn't really surprise me when I started to hear him telling these stories. And of course, the first time I saw him do that was with Umar Johnson, right? Dr. Umar Johnson. They had an exchange that was actually really powerful, mainly because the young brother was really reaching out to an older Umar. You could tell he was looking for father figures, and he talks at length about the damage that his mother did to him emotionally and to his psyche. And I think it's important that Black men at this stage of the game be able to voice that. It's an important stage in one's healing to be able to state what's happened to you, acknowledge it, and the impact it had. Explore how you became who you became because of your response to certain types of trauma. It's incredibly important and necessary for men to do this. So I'm glad he did. Now, in this exchange, this is another one, and it's a much shorter exchange, and he actually retells the story of meeting his father, but he tells it in a much more succinct fashion than he did when he talked to Umar, and he added an extra element. He talked about the exchange he witnessed between his mother and father. Now, if I remember correctly, in the prior interview with Umar, he kind of talked about the stress and trauma of seeing or witnessing his parents arguing over the phone, but this time he added another nugget to it. He talked about the way his mother backed down. And that was interesting, because he said he's never seen her do that. He'd never witnessed his mother be submissive. And she did so, not even in the physical presence, right? But engaging his father. And it taught him something, I believe, about the power of masculinity. Because when you're raised by single mothers in a gynocracy, they downplay the power of masculinity, and you never see it in action. Because most of the time, these women only choose men they can control. Men they have something over, men that aren't really around often. And as he says, right, his mom just got married to some dude off of Tinder she met a month ago because she didn't want to be alone, right? So that tells you the only kind of men these boys really witness are the men that their mothers allow them to witness. And that's powerful. It says a lot about the types of masculinity that young Black men are introduced to growing up. And it speaks to the kind of work that we have to do as young men to find our manhood. And this is what I think a lot of the manosphere is about. It's young men, really not even just young men, but Black men in particular, looking to establish and learn what we were supposed to be taught at a young age. And many of us weren't, especially Gen X and beyond. Gen X especially, because we were the first generation to really endure single parent, rearing. But it's only grown since then. It's really gotten worse, right? And a lot of the times, the comfortable narrative we were given was that these men were deadbeat fathers and they left. But once we reached a certain level of adulthood and we started to have the same experiences, we found that it wasn't, that it was just a matter of deadbeat dads. And I'm not saying there aren't men that aren't, but there's more than that. There needs to be more nuance to these discussions, because there's more. One of the things we found is many of these men were ran off. And they were ran off because women had the power of the state at their disposal. Think about what Kalan talked about. He said, my sister and I were used as pawns. And they had two different fathers. His mother used, the state and the power she had from the state via family court, right, to control how much access both men had to their respective children in her household. That's not a power women always had. That's a recent power, really that came about in the 1970s, 60s and 70s, late 60s and 70s. So the point I'm making here is that because of that kind of dynamic, because of that kind of power that women newly had access to, the kind of control they could wield, many men had few other options but to leave. You're dealing with an uncooperative woman that wants to control you and is willing to use your children against you. That's never part of the mainstream narrative. The mainstream narrative about black families and the absent black father is that black men are trifling, black men are deadbeat dads, but nobody wants to talk about the structural and institutional power that was offered to black women in a time period where women were pushing to be in the marketplace. And this is important because really the reason you have so many of these industries catering and bending over for women is because they became a new market force unto themselves. They were a new market force to be taxed. They were a new market force that could consume. And so you have all these industries that seem to be catering to them. And what it promotes, or at least how women use it in many instances, is to make the suggestion that this is all happening because women are inherently right. They immediately go to this Victorian notion of femininity. And somehow the status that they are now enjoying is a product of the rightness of the universe acknowledging their inherent goodness. No, these are economic market forces. They're being catered to for material reasons. And as soon as those material reasons subside, so too does the catering. But back to Kalan. So Kalan talks about this exchange and he witnesses the power of his father. Also, which witnesses the stability of his father's home. Said his father's remarried. His father's happy and he's doing his thing. And he's contradicting that. He's contrasting that, with his mother's life, which is pure chaos. And he's starting to notice that all the things that his mother did to him, right, had to do with her issues. And that she wasn't inherently better. She wasn't inherently right. Because his father's very lifestyle suggested that his mother was wrong. And that's important. That's a huge revelation to black men that haven't learned that yet, that haven't had to see that. And it's important that it comes from your father. It's important because you get to see in your own bloodline that all of the notions of manhood that are devalued by society, by the black community, by the Black Gynarchy, and even the mothers, aunts, cousins, the gynocrats in your own family, who are the primary decision makers because of the absence of men that they were able to run off because they couldn't control them or could, right? The point being, it's important that you see how successful men can be by breaking from the gynocracy, those men in your own bloodline. And Kalan witnessed this. And I believe that impact is going to stay with him. I believe it's one of the reasons that he's seeking out other black men, but that piece is crucial to his own development, to see his own father be able to stand up. So that's important. What else did he see? So he talked about the feeling he had with his father seeking him out. That is powerful. That is powerful. He said his mother lied and said his father wasn't shit and blah, 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 which is the traditional narrative we've been hearing since the 1980s, really. Right? But he said, you could see and you could hear it in his voice. You could see it in his face. The feeling of finding out that his father actually had been looking for him. And here's the thing. It's more than just that his father was looking for him. His father had receipts. See, men function on evidence. Men function on what can be proven. You know what I mean? It's not enough to just say something. It's not enough to just feel a certain way. You got to find evidence. And this is what was important. His father produced receipts when his mother tried to intimate that his father didn't care for him because he never paid child support. The man pulled out receipts. It's one thing to sit in your father's living room for the first time and hear him say, "No, I looked for you." And that's it. It's another thing for him to pull out a box and show you receipts. That has a profound impact on that young man to find out. And you can hear, like I said, you can hear it in his voice, what it felt like to know his father cared enough to be looking for him. That was profound, right? Let me see. The other part is the maternal child abuse. This is important. He talked a little bit, but he was fairly descriptive in that short, period where he talked about the abuse, the physical and emotional abuse extended by his mother. Now, this is interesting and important because as a young man, the last thing you know how to do is defend yourself physically against your mother. Now, one could argue she more than likely had psychological issues that were probably something she needed medication for, or she may have needed serious therapy. One could argue that. But to be honest with you, I've seen that quite a bit. Whether it was diagnosed or not, it's not an isolated incident in that regard. And that's the one thing I don't want to do in talking about this by saying, oh, well, she had issues, somehow making it some kind of individual experience that doesn't happen very often. No, we know that in terms of the data, those who inflict child abuse the most are women. And in the Black community, even on Twitter, we get casually, and you can go to Dr. Tommy J. Curry's Twitter page and you can see these exchanges that he's challenging. But they're constant attacks at Black men, making arguments that we are the killers of women and children. Like it's some rampant thing. Really, what we're talking about is a fraction of 1% of men who kill their wives and partners. And to be honest with you, statistically speaking, the number of women that kill their male partners is not a whole lot different. They're damn near equal. But both are a fraction of less than 1%. And somehow for Black men, that becomes the face of all Black men. And it isn't. So, fellas, do not let these women tell these lies around you. I don't care if you're sitting at a family reunion or Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner. When they start exchanging these anecdotal stories about because one Black man did something to a child or a woman, that this is somehow indicative of how all Black men act, no. We're talking about less than a percentage. And the number for female aggressors are not far off. And out of 43 million Black folk, they're so minuscule that the fact that we're talking about it is evidence of a snow job. Evidence of an attempt to downplay Black men's public reputation over numbers that are insignificant. Insignificant. And if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, because this is usually where you'll hear feminists say things like, well, Black men kill Black women at twice the percent. Okay. Check out the percentage of Black women that kill Black men compared to other groups. Not the raw numbers, because we're a small population, right? If you got a larger population, their numbers are going to be larger, but it doesn't mean it happens more in their community. You got to look at the percentages. And what you'll find is, yes, Black women kill Black men in intimate partner dealings more so than other groups kill their men. Other groups of women kill their men. Yes, but nobody talks about that because it's not part of the dominant narrative about what we're supposed to talk about. We're supposed to villainize Black men, and that's supposed to be the end of the discussion. And what you'll have are feminist trolls that will come into discussions to reinforce the dominant narrative because that's what they've been taught. You got women in their 60s all the way down to their 20s. The ones in their 20s are learning this in feminist and women and gender studies courses in college campuses. The older ones, especially those that never went to college, they learned it reading and watching films by Alice Walker. I have a whole post on my Facebook page that is on fire right now because I challenged the depiction that Walker gave in Color Purple of Black men. And one of the things you see in there are women coming to defend it, not because they have any real evidence that this is somehow a widespread phenomenon, but because it's what they've been taught. And I simply posed the statement. I said, look, how many wealthy farm-owning men at really the turn of the century, early 20th century how many, misters do you think there were? That was infinitesimal. In fact, there were a greater percentage of women, Black women, that owned slaves than Black men. They had a different relationship with white men than Black men had. So white men, white women, and Black women owned more slaves than Black men ever did. Especially the offspring, the female offspring of white men and Black women. They held more slaves. But somehow, again, this becomes something that Black men are known for. And it's ridiculous. So a couple of things. The narratives need to change. And we need to be the ones to challenge them because nobody else will. It works in other groups' interest to leave the narratives in the mainstream the way they are. We have to challenge them because those narratives tend to work against us. We need to acknowledge that state-supported women attack their men and that men respond by walking away. And what other options do they have? Right? If they respond physically, who goes to jail? if they are abused because she's using the state resources given to her against him, even to the degree where she's willing to get physical, knowing that she's less likely to go to jail for it, even if he defends himself, he can end up in jail. So between child support, between divorce proceedings, and even access to welfare, or the policies around violence against women, right? What options did it leave many black men with? They had to leave. Many a family setting. Yeah, and because of birth control, we're not even going to talk about how many men didn't want families in the first place and thought they could trust the women they were with. Many of those women told them, I'm on the pill, I'm on this, I'm on that, you'll be fine. That mess happened all the way up through the mid-90s when I was in college. Your girl could tell you that. I'm on the pill, you're good. Shoot away. Feels better that way. I don't like the way condoms feel. That was a common discussion. I can't tell you how many men ended up with kids they didn't want. But how do you tell a child that's asking for your love that you never wanted them? You look like a monster. And most particularly, the male children don't understand that experience until they're dealing with a girl who's gotten pregnant behind a child they didn't want. And you have the option to step up, as they say, and be a man for a family that you never even asked for. As a matter of fact, the family you could have told her explicitly you never wanted when she misrepresented what she was doing in terms of birth control. And then the onus comes back on you. And to some extent, it's warranted because, yeah, okay, you could cover up, you could do other things, you can get a vasectomy, even though we have we have far fewer options than women in terms of birth control. But yeah, men could take more responsibility. But understand what that also means. It also means that we have to accept a degree of distrust that we have to have for the women we're with. And that wasn't always the case. So it's not just the product. It's not just an issue where men, were just irresponsible to be irresponsible. We trusted in many instances the women we were with. I'm not saying this is in all cases, but there are a significant number of cases like this that we don't get to talk about in the mainstream, where you have men who were in a position where they thought they could trust the woman they were with, who intimated, if not outright stated, she was on something. And when she decided she wanted a baby, changed the plan and didn't tell you. So it could be your father, it could be you, hell, it could be your grandfather or your son, who is now, or at some point in time, dealing with a child or children he didn't want. And even if he still tried to step up, because even though he didn't want this family, had to deal with her control efforts and the way she used the state and whatever other abilities the state extended her against you as a control mechanism. Don't have a prison record. Don't. Because one of the things you'll find is that's used against you as well, as another form of control. Hell, even here in Fresno, I've had brothers call me in the last 2 months telling me stories about women that have sent their ex-con boyfriends and husbands back to jail simply because she was mad at him, or he came home late, or he didn't do what she wanted him to do. See, these are all control measures, or I should say they're used as control measures. That man could have built himself up from scratch since he got out of prison, built up his own business. He's in his late 40s and 50s. He's doing well for himself, but that record doesn't go anywhere. And she knows it. And she has the power to exploit it. Even if she's a good woman and won't, she still has the power. And men have to take that into account. So there's a degree of distrust that we actually have to internalize for our own survival. And that works against many of us. Many of us have never thought we needed to do that. And that's what Kalan is learning. But he's learning it in a way that's incredibly powerful. He's learning it about his mother. And this is key. Because Patrice O'Neal, my favorite comedian, used to say that it's an important stage in one's manhood to realize that your mother is your father's woman. Of course, he says it in his own way. But that's an incredibly important thing, because we put our mothers on pedestals because they have in the traditional sense, they're supposed to have an undying love for you, right? An unconditional love. That's what the idea is anyway. But it's an important thing for a young man to realize that your mother is just your father's woman. And once you begin to see it that way, and then you begin to look at the women in your life, then you understand your father. But many of us didn't try to understand our fathers. We learned to demonize them. This is why it's important to sit down with your father at some point to get his side of the story. And that isn't to say that these men are always innocent. They didn't do anything, but they weren't the 99% of the time, they were not the sole cause of everybody's problem, the way they're depicted. You're raised in an all-female family and you hear stories about men from women who are in pain. Trust me when I tell you, a lot of that pain governs the story. Sit down and talk to your father, and do not look at him through the eyes of a frustrated young man who's hurt by his absence. Look at him through the eyes of a grown man who understands the nature of women and men, the nature of relationships, the nature of how pain dictates the shaping of a story. Look at him as a grown man and ask him to tell you about what happened that brought you into this world. And look at him as a man telling a story about what happened in his life. 99% of the time, you're going to find at least one thing out in that story you didn't know. And if you are a man and you've had some life experience, you're going to understand way more about how you came into this world and the role that both your parents played. And it's going to deviate from the narrative you were given. And the more you understand it, stronger you'll be. And this is what Kalan is going through. He's realizing the lies he's been told, and he's finding out the truth, which in turn liberates him to figure out the truth of himself. Now, whether or not he achieves that, I can't say, but all the tools are on the table, as it were. Right? So that's important. The child abuse component is incredibly important. It wasn't just that she lied to him about his upbringing, but she abused him as well to control him. And by the time he became an adult, he was already controlled. Y'all have all heard the story about the elephant, right, in the circus. And when the elephant is young, they put a stake in the ground, they tie a rope around his leg, and no matter how hard he tries, he walks away. And they keep doing it and keep doing it. And by the time the elephant is full grown, they can tie a string and damn near use a toothpick in the ground. And the elephant has conditioned himself to believe that he can't get away from that rope because he couldn't when he was younger, right? Obviously, I'm kind of twisting the story a little bit to get a point across, but my point is that's what happens with young black men. Much of the time, we are socialized to serve women, and we are socialized to believe that our role is to do nothing but that. And that if we are punished for doing something wrong, which is basically, in essence, it usually waters down to hurting a woman's feelings, we are inherently wrong. And we are the monsters we're told we are because her feelings are hurt. And any such man that's done that in the past, you as a good man are supposed to hate, and you're supposed to challenge him and fight him if need be at her request. Proxy violence in the black community especially is real. And I post stories on this all the time where men even kill other men at the word of a frustrated woman. But again, there's no space in mainstream culture to have that conversation. So in the end, you just have one man killing another. And the conversation is about why black men kill each other. And it's an important conversation. I'm not suggesting that proxy violence is the majority of killings by any measure, but I am saying it is part of the discussion that we do not know how to have because it is unwelcome in many circles. But her abuse of him is incredibly important. As women abuse children more because they're the primary caregivers of children, somehow in the black community that turns into black men abusing and killing women and children, even though that's not true. They're damn near equal numbers in terms of homicide against women and women against men, as far as intimate partner homicide in the black community. And as far as the abuse and killing of children, it's women's domain, not men's. We have to push back on these narratives, right? But the ultimate reason I posed this video is to let you know. There's some men that don't feel there's an answer to any of this. Some men that feel that this, that in terms of the gynarchy or this gender war, that there really is no answer. And there are even some men that actually believe that you just need to yield to the gynarchy and leave it as such because there's nothing that can be done about it. And I think what Kalan's story about his father and mother tells us is there is an answer to this. Notice how when the father was free of her control, and this is what some fathers do too. Some fathers actually do leave because they refuse to be controlled and dominated by an exploitive woman. But they don't leave because they don't care. They leave, and notice they start another family. Because he even said that's what his father did. His father was married. They go leave, they start another family where they don't have to deal with that. But here's the key. Often, many of these men wait for their children to come of age so they can tell them what really happened. And you can go from the breast milk you've been given to the hard meat of life when you're able to digest it and understand the truth of what actually took place in your upbringing. And many fathers wait and are doing that to this day. There are many fathers who are literally packing a bag as I'm speaking, and they're waiting years in the future for their sons and daughters to come seek them out when they're ready to hear the father's experience. So what I'm saying in regard to the gynocracy is, and using Kalan's father as an example, the answer to it is the free black man. The black man that is not controlled by his exes, the black man that is not controlled by the state, the free black man who can speak his truth and build his relationship with those around him, and it's not predicated on navigating control and fighting over it, when he can stand on his own too. Notice he said his dad is a street dude. He didn't have a formal corporate job. And, he didn't say if he was educated, but even if we assume he isn't, doesn't matter. As long as he's independent enough to stand on his own 2 feet. Notice how his mother responded to his father when his father, made his presence felt. That strength couldn't be denied. Oh, she could deny it when he wasn't present. She could deny it when she controlled and dictated the narrative of Kalan's life story and her story. She couldn't deny it when she was even on the phone with him. Imagine how much different it would be in his presence. You have free black men that are not controlled. That's the answer. So in this space, we urge men to stand on their own. It's not about putting hands on a woman. It's not about, homicide. It's not about none of that. The more you stand on your own too, that's the answer. So, real talk. Hope you all enjoyed. Love to hear your comments in the closing, in the comment section. Have a good one. Peace.